and we're able to be at the gates of heaven, all of a sudden we're going to say, yes, I want to go in. And yes, I will give up everything to go into heaven, right? That's what the young man asks. What must I do to inherit everlasting life? What must I do to enter the kingdom of heaven? And so this young man wants to get there. That's understood. And he's willing to do things because he's saying, what do I do? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get into heaven. And what happens? Jesus names all the things he already knows. He says, I know those things will get me to heaven, so I've already done them, is what he's saying. I've done those things since my youth. The young man says, there must be more than this. I feel that I have to do something to get into heaven. And so you can imagine the young man standing there at the gates of heaven, and Jesus says, if you want to go in there, you need to do this. Now, don't we think that every single one of us would do that? We see our loved ones in heaven. We see Fido, who died when we were 6, in heaven. We see paradise. We see everything we want. We see God, and we're invited to be part of him, part of his divinity. Wouldn't we do anything to get there? This fulfills our greatest desires. That's what paradise is. That's what heaven is. That's what unity with God and each other is. Fulfills our greatest desires. So I think any of us in this room could judge that young man and say, why didn't he do that? If he knew that was what would get him to heaven, why couldn't he do it? So therefore, instead of being the prideful ones like I was when I first read this and saying, I would have given anything, Lord. Goodness gracious, it's just my stuff. To get into heaven, of course I would. One of the things we need to remember is that think about what we think about for most of the day. I think it'd be horribly embarrassing if we had some machine that could tell us what percentage of the day we think about different things. Do you guys ever, those of you that are on Facebook a lot, there's that one thing where you can go on there and see what words you use most, right? And this is what you're showing to the world. I think my sisters-in-law did it, and it was like, I think, Stacy, you said Christopher like most, which was very flattering. You were talking about your husband most. The name of your kids. It shows the things that we talk about most, right? And as we show these things, you can imagine doing that in life. What are we thinking about most? I think most of the time it would be ourselves, right? And it'd be horribly embarrassing what percentage of the day we think about ourselves. And what I mean here is this is what the young man was doing. He says, if I give this up, I think we can read into it that he's giving up his very identity. Have you guys seen on the news? Again, we're celebrating Labor Day tomorrow. You've seen on the news how many people are out of work. And they go to these job fairs, and there's this man dressed really, really nice. And he's interviewing for jobs flipping burgers or making pizza. And he's the only one to show up at the job fair in a suit. And you can see that suit has been well worn. In other words, he used to wear this suit to work every single day. And now he's afraid he's never going to wear that suit again because he's taking a job that you don't wear a suit for. You take a job that you wear a uniform for or whatever. And I saw an interview just the other day. She walks up and she goes, what's the hardest thing about this? And he goes, my self-esteem. He says, I'm applying for these jobs that humiliate me. Not because the job itself is, but because what I used to do. I used to be an executive. I used to do all these things, and now I have to do this down here, right? How tempted are people like that to go blow all their money gambling? How tempted are people like that to go blow all their money or to make money selling drugs or whatever it is? Our self-esteem is huge. It is huge. We will do things that we never thought we'd do for our own self-esteem. Thank God for this man who was not only humble enough to go apply for one of those jobs, but humble enough to say so on TV. Right? I respected him a lot. So what it is about our identity and what are we willing to give up? Does our identity come from the money we have? From the house we have? From the family we have? Does our identity come from our service personality? How funny I am? How good looking I am? How many of these things would I be willing to lose and still be myself? I think what Jesus did is he pinpointed that one thing in the young man. This young man finds his identity in money. And so he says, you need to give everything up that is not what will get you into heaven. And it's important that we think of those things. What are we willing to give up? And I hope it's everything, because that's what Jesus asks. Absolutely everything. So once again, we look at heaven. What is heaven? Heaven is unity with God and unity with each other. It is no more than that. And that fulfills our every desire. Unity with God and unity with one another. That's why the Divine Liturgy is as close to heaven as we're ever going to get on this world. Because here we are receiving the Eucharist and participating in the divine liturgy that is unity with God, and here we are gathered as a community, receiving the Eucharist together, so therefore it is like heaven now. And so what are we willing to give up except those two things? My faith in God and my love for my neighbor. Those are the only two things we should not be willing to give up. Everything else we should. So therefore, when you see an Olympic person training, does it make any sense for someone who, the point of this time in the Olympics is to win the race tomorrow? So do you see them saying, well, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to be running a race, not to be all physical, so tonight I'm going to splurge on McDonald's and ice cream. Does that make any sense? No. But what does our modern culture say about bachelor parties? Right? I know tomorrow I'm going to marry the love of my life, and I'm going to be united with them for all eternity, so tonight I'm going to act like I'm not. That makes no sense. Right? The modern conception of bachelor parties for that reason is I'm going to be a bachelor for one more night, and I'll splurge and act like a bachelor. No. The point of our Christian life is to say this is our goal. Passing through the eye of a needle. And if the eye of a needle is the entrance into heaven, then I'm going to spend my life making sure I can pass through the eye of that needle. And I'm going to spend my life purging myself of everything that might not let me pass through there. But I'm also going to spend my life saying, you know what? Even in the end, after I purge everything, I still can't get through. It's impossible. And I need God. I need God to purge myself of all these things that I'm purging myself of. And even in the end, I need God to continue to purge me and to still, in a sense, to use this image, shrink me down well enough to get into that eye of the needle. So, it's important then as we think about the things, and especially if we ask ourselves, wake up in the morning and say, Lord, show me today, the prayer of St. Ephraim, let me see my own sins. Say, Lord, show me today those things that are getting in the way. Again, is it my physical appearance? Is it my surface personality? Is it my money, my house, my family? What are the things I brag about when I'm talking to people I just met? And Lord, teach me to stop bragging about those things, because none of those things matter. The only thing I brag about, as St. Paul says, is the cross. It's what Jesus did for me. The cross was the shrinking ray that allows us to go through the eye of the needle. I'm sorry, these things I just think up on the spot. I really am. The cross is the shrinking ray that shrinks us down to pass through the eye of a needle. And say, that's all I should brag about. That's where I spend my time thinking about, not myself. And then we need to begin, through Christ's power, to purge ourselves of all the things that we think are our identity. The things that we say, this makes up Father Michael. And then say, Lord, as hard as it might be, please purge me of these things. And then once we do that, we start understanding now my reliance on God will let me get into heaven through the eye of that needle. Amen? In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.